Hey guys, tonight we journey back to a Europe where the greatest fear was not war, nor kings, nor even the long winters. It was the invisible companions that lived beside every family, diseases so terrifying that entire villages whispered their names only after crossing themselves. Tonight, you are not a knight, nor a noble, nor a famous physician. You are simply an ordinary traveler whose greatest hope is to survive one more season in a world where a cough, a swollen lump, or a strange rash might quietly become the last chapter of your story. Before we begin, take a moment to settle in. Dim the lights if you like, find a comfortable position, and let the sounds of medieval Europe replace the noise of the modern world. As always, this is a journey through history meant to help you relax while discovering the remarkable and sometimes horrifying lives of ordinary people long ago. The year is 1347. The sun is only beginning to rise above the mist-covered fields as your boots press into damp earth outside the city walls. Overnight rain has turned the road into thick brown mud, and every passing cart leaves deep grooves that slowly fill with cloudy water. A faint smell of wet straw mixes with smoke drifting from dozens of chimneys beyond the wooden gate. You have been walking for nearly 3 days. Your pack is light because it contains little more than coarse bread, dried peas, a wooden cup, a small knife, and a wool blanket. The rest of your belongings were sold months ago after another poor harvest left your family with little choice. Like countless others across Europe, you travel wherever work might be found, hopping to earn enough coins to survive another winter. The city before you seems alive. Merchants unload barrels from wagons, while farmers argue over market spaces. Chickens wander freely between muddy boots. Dogs bark at passing strangers before losing interest entirely. Church bells echo across rooftops, marking another ordinary morning that feels comfortingly familiar. Yet beneath that ordinary rhythm lies something difficult to explain. People glance at newcomers longer than they once did. Travelers are questioned more carefully. A merchant quietly asks another whether the ships arriving from the south have brought troubling news again. Nobody says exactly what that news is. Rumors travel much faster than wagons. Some speak of strange sickness in distant ports. Others insist entire households have disappeared within days. A monk passing through claims God has sent a warning unlike anything remembered in generations. Another insists foreign traders carried poisoned air from lands beyond the sea. No one truly knows. That uncertainty is perhaps the most frightening part. In the medieval world, disease rarely announced itself with certainty. It arrived quietly, hidden among crowds, concealed inside ordinary routines, impossible to recognize, until it had already become everyone's concern. You eventually pass beneath the heavy gate. Inside, the streets narrow immediately. Upper stories of timber houses lean toward one another as though trying to share secrets overhead. Sunlight reaches the ground only in scattered patches. Wastewater trickles along shallow channels cut beside the road. Children run barefoot despite the cold, laughing as though illness belongs only to distant places. Life continues because it must. A baker slides fresh loaves from a brick oven, while apprentices carry baskets toward waiting customers. The smell of warm bread briefly overpowers less pleasant odors drifting from animal pens, refuse heaps, and overflowing drains. Modern visitors often imagine medieval people as careless about cleanliness. The truth is more complicated. Many people washed whenever they could. Public bathhouses existed in numerous towns. Clean linen was valued. Herbal remedies were common. But understanding why disease spread remained almost entirely beyond human knowledge. Without microscopes or germ theory, invisible causes stayed invisible. If sickness entered a household, families searched for explanations that made sense within the knowledge they possessed. Perhaps foul air had settled over the neighborhood. Perhaps unusual stars warned of disaster. Perhaps sins had invited divine punishment. Perhaps an unlucky alignment of bodily humors had thrown the body into dangerous imbalance. Each explanation offered comfort because uncertainty felt unbearable. You soon find temporary work, unloading sacks of grain near the marketplace. The labor is exhausting but familiar. Strong backs are always needed as you lift heavy loads alongside strangers. Conversations drift naturally from harvests to taxes, from local gossip to increasingly unsettling reports from abroad. A sailor claims several ports across the Mediterranean have become strangely quiet. Another worker dismisses the story with a shrug. There are always rumors, he says. Every year, someone predicts the end. The others nod. Europe has endured famine before. It has survived wars, failed harvests, brutal winters, and local outbreaks of sickness. Surely this will prove no different. By midday, the marketplace grows louder. Fishmongers shout over butchers. Blacksmiths hammer glowing iron into horseshoes. Women negotiate fiercely over cheese and onions. Children weave effortlessly between adults carrying baskets almost larger than themselves. Nothing here resembles the beginning of catastrophe. History rarely announces its turning points. Instead, ordinary mornings continue almost unchanged until someone notices that familiar faces have quietly begun disappearing. Late that afternoon, an elderly physician crosses the square. His robe is faded. A leather satchel hangs from one shoulder. Inside are carefully wrapped herbs, glass flasks, handwritten notes copied from ancient authorities, and instruments that represent centuries of accumulated medical learning. He has studied respected texts. He knows the teachings of famous scholars. He genuinely wishes to heal, yet he stands only a few years away from confronting a disease that will overwhelm nearly every certainty medicine possesses. The illnesses awaiting medieval Europe cannot be reasoned away through balance alone. Some spread too quickly, others destroy the body too violently. Many leave physicians recording symptoms they cannot explain and outcomes they cannot prevent. For now, however, the city remains hopeful. Evening settles gradually. Church bells ring again. Smoke thickens above rooftops as families prepare simple meals. Doors close against cooling air. Candles flicker behind tiny windows. You find a corner inside a crowded inn where travelers exchange stories over weak ale and coarse stew. One merchant quietly mentions a bustling Sicilian port where ships reportedly arrived carrying crews already dying. The room falls unusually silent. Someone laughs nervously. Another changes the subject. Outside, rain begins falling once more, tapping softly against the wooden roof while horses shuffle inside nearby stables. You pull your blanket around your shoulders and lie awake longer than expected. The city sounds peaceful. No screams, no panic, only distant bells, quiet conversations, crackling fireplaces, and steady rainfall. Yet somewhere far beyond the horizon, something has already begun moving toward Europe. Not an army, not an emperor, not a conquering kingdom. Something far smaller, something invisible. And before many seasons pass, medieval people will discover that the deadliest enemies are sometimes those no human eye can ever see. Morning arrives beneath a sky the color of worn wool. The rain has finally passed, leaving every rooftop shining faintly under the pale light. Water drips steadily from the eaves, splashing into muddy lanes already busy with carts and pedestrians. The inn begins to stir long before sunrise. Somewhere downstairs, someone splits firewood with slow, deliberate blows. A woman kneads dough while humming a hymn so softly that the melody almost disappears beneath the crackling hearth. Nearby, a sleepy stable boy struggles to convince a stubborn mule that another day of hauling supplies has begun. You rise stiffly from the straw mattress, grateful that the blanket kept most of the night's chill away. Around you, travelers prepare for another uncertain day. A mason tightens the leather straps on his boots before setting off toward a construction site. Two merchants quietly argue over the safest road north. A monk folds his cloak with practiced precision, pausing only to whisper a brief morning prayer before stepping outside. Nothing seems unusual. That is one of history's quietest lessons. The beginning of disaster almost never feels like the beginning. People wake, eat breakfast, complain about aching backs, and worry about ordinary concerns, because ordinary concerns remain easier to understand than distant rumors. You accept another day unloading grain near the eastern warehouses. The work is repetitive, but repetition offers comfort. Heavy sacks move from wagons to storage sheds in an endless rhythm. Dust rises into the morning air until every worker's face carries a pale coating of flour. Laughter breaks out whenever someone stumbles into the mud, followed by friendly insults that quickly disappear beneath the sound of creaking wagon wheels. By midday, the market reaches its busiest hour. Farmers from nearby villages display baskets filled with onions, beans, turnips, and cabbages. Hunters offer rabbits suspended from wooden poles. Fish brought inland before dawn now rest upon damp cloths packed with river reeds in a desperate attempt to remain fresh. The smells compete for attention. Fresh bread, wood smoke, wet leather, animal manure, salted fish, boiling cabbage, human sweat. To modern senses, the mixture might seem overwhelming. Yet for those living here, it is simply the scent of another working day. A young herbalist arranges bunches of dried plants across a narrow stall. Lavender hangs beside rosemary. Sage rests beside mint. Bundles of thyme release a pleasant fragrance each time someone brushes past. Customers approach not merely for pleasant aromas, but because herbs remain among the most trusted medicines available. Headaches, stomach pains, sleeplessness, persistent coughs. Almost every complaint has its recommended mixture. Knowledge passes from teacher to apprentice, from grandmother to granddaughter, from monastery gardens to village healers. Although many remedies provide comfort, others accomplish little beyond giving frightened families something to do while hopping the body heals itself. Not far away stands a barber. His trade extends well beyond trimming beards. A customer settles into a wooden chair while the barber prepares for bloodletting, one of medieval Europe's most common medical practices. According to accepted theory, illness often resulted from an imbalance among the body's four humors. Removing blood could, physicians believed, restore harmony inside the patient. The man winces as the procedure begins. Those watching seem unconcerned. This is familiar medicine. No one questions it. The greatest medical discoveries still lie centuries in the future. Invisible organisms remain beyond imagination. Bacteria have no name. Viruses have no definition. Disease belongs instead to a world explained through observation, tradition, philosophy, and faith. Later that afternoon, while carrying another heavy sack toward the warehouse, you notice an unusual gathering near the city gate. Travelers have arrived from the south. Their wagon appears ordinary enough. Its wheels are thick with dried mud collected over many miles. The horse pulling it hangs its head with exhaustion. Two children sit quietly beneath a canvas covering, unusually silent for their age. City guards question the travelers for longer than expected. People nearby pretend not to listen while carefully hearing every word. Where have you come from? How long were you on the road? Were the ports crowded? Were there problems? The answers remain difficult to hear. Whispers spread far more quickly than facts. Someone claims several villages reported unexplained deaths. Another insists the stories are exaggerated. A baker shrugs. If sickness were truly that terrible, he says, surely the king would have warned everyone. His confidence sounds reassuring. Whether it is justified remains another matter entirely. As evening approaches, you wander toward the parish church, where candles flicker before painted saints darkened by centuries of smoke. Worshippers kneel quietly upon worn stone floors, polished smooth by countless footsteps. The priest speaks gently about patience. He reminds everyone that suffering has always existed. Storms arrive, harvests fail, children fall ill, old people pass away. Life continues because faith teaches endurance rather than certainty. Many listeners find comfort in those words. Others continue glancing toward the entrance each time another traveler walks inside. Fear often enters communities one rumor at a time. Outside, clouds drift slowly across a fading orange sky. Swallows dart between rooftops, chasing insects, before disappearing into hidden nests beneath timber beams. Bells announce the evening hour once again, their familiar rhythm echoing through every narrow street. Back at the inn, supper consists of coarse bread dipped into thick pottage made from peas, onions, and whatever vegetables remained unsold in the market. It is filling rather than flavorful, though nobody complains. Hunger leaves little room for luxury. An elderly merchant joins your table. His face bears deep lines carved by decades spent traveling Europe's roads. He has crossed mountain passes buried beneath snow, survived storms at sea, and visited cities whose languages change every few hundred miles. He speaks quietly. In my youth, he says, people feared wolves more than sickness. Someone chuckles. Wolves can only catch one man at a time. The old merchant nods slowly. Exactly. He stares into the fire for several moments before continuing. I have seen villages emptied after fevers. The room grows still. No battle, no raid, no famine, only illness. A younger traveler asks what kind of fever. The old man simply shakes his head. It wore many names. None of them mattered once it entered a house. Silence follows. Even those who doubt exaggerated tales know illness has always possessed strange power. A sword threatens only those standing nearby. Disease ignores walls, wealth, age, and courage. When darkness fully settles across the town, shutters close against the cool evening breeze. Oil lamps glow softly behind narrow windows. Somewhere beyond the walls, an owl calls from an ancient oak, while crickets begin their steady chorus across damp meadows. You step outside briefly before sleeping. The stars emerge one by one. Above them stretches the same immense sky watched by emperors, shepherds, monks, and fishermen alike. People have long searched those stars for signs. Some believe unusual alignments foretell war. Others expect famine. Many think heaven itself sends warnings before great suffering arrives. Unknown to every soul standing beneath this peaceful night, no constellation will reveal what is approaching. The danger does not descend from the heavens. It travels silently with commerce, with wagons, with ships, with grain, with cloth, with ordinary people pursuing ordinary lives. Every road connecting Europe's towns also connects their fortunes. Merchants celebrate those roads because they carry prosperity. Pilgrims bless them because they lead toward holy places. Kings maintain them because they strengthen kingdoms. Yet the same paths, welcoming wealth, can also welcome catastrophe. For centuries, Europe has become increasingly connected through trade. Ports exchange spices, wool, timber, wine, and precious metals. Every successful journey binds distant communities a little closer together. That growing network has transformed daily life. It has also unknowingly prepared the perfect pathways for history's deadliest visitor. Still, none of this can yet be seen. Tomorrow, the markets will open. Children will chase each other through muddy streets. Blacksmiths will light their forges. Monks will copy manuscripts beneath quiet candlelight. Farmers will guide plows across fertile fields. Life, in every visible way, will continue exactly as it always has. And perhaps that is the most haunting truth of all. The world rarely realizes it is standing at the edge of an age-defining tragedy until it has already taken the first irreversible step forward. The following morning begins with a pale ribbon of sunlight stretching across the eastern horizon, gradually lifting the mist that has settled over the fields beyond the city walls. Dew clings to every blade of grass, sparkling briefly before disappearing beneath the growing warmth of the day. From somewhere nearby comes the rhythmic sound of a rooster announcing dawn, although most of the city has already awakened long before its call. Medieval life rarely allows anyone the luxury of sleeping late. The streets slowly fill with familiar movement. Bakers carry fresh loaves toward market stalls, balanced inside woven baskets. Apprentices hurry after their masters, careful not to fall behind. Housewives negotiate with vegetable sellers over onions and beans, while children weave effortlessly through the crowd, chasing one another despite repeated warnings to stay out of the way of wagons. You make your way toward the central square, where another day's labor awaits. The grain warehouse stands exactly as it did yesterday, its thick wooden doors already thrown open to receive deliveries arriving from nearby villages. Oxen strain against heavy carts piled high, with sacks harvested only weeks before. Drivers shout commands, while laborers organize the growing mountain of grain that represents the city's greatest protection against the coming winter. Food, after all, means survival. In medieval Europe, nearly every family measures prosperity not in silver coins, but in how long their supplies might last. A generous harvest can mean comfort for months. A failed one may begin a chain of hardship that touches every household before spring returns. Disease often thrives where hunger has already weakened the body. Although physicians of your time do not understand the invisible relationship between nutrition and immunity, they recognize something simpler through experience. People enduring famine seem to fall ill more easily. They recover more slowly. Entire communities become fragile after seasons of poor harvests. No one knows exactly why. They only know that it happens. By mid-morning, a group of monks enters the marketplace, carrying small baskets filled with herbs cultivated inside monastery gardens. Monasteries serve many purposes beyond prayer. They preserve books copied patiently by candlelight. They educate young novices. They shelter weary travelers. And perhaps most importantly, during uncertain times, they preserve generations of medical knowledge inherited from Greek, Roman, and Arabic scholars. One elderly monk pauses beside an anxious woman, holding the hand of a coughing child. He kneels slowly. The boy's forehead feels warm. His breathing sounds slightly uneven. The monk asks gentle questions before preparing a simple herbal infusion intended to ease the cough. He offers quiet reassurance rather than certainty. Most illnesses disappear on their own. Others do not. The challenge lies in knowing which is which. Across the square, another physician consults with a wealthy merchant complaining of recurring stomach pain. The doctor listens carefully before discussing diet, sleep, exercise, and the balance of bodily humors. His advice reflects the finest medical understanding available in 14th century Europe. To modern readers, much of it may seem misguided, yet it would be unfair to dismiss these physicians as foolish. They observed carefully. They kept records. They debated ideas. They sincerely wanted to heal their patients. They simply lacked the tools necessary to discover the microscopic world responsible for so much suffering. Without lenses powerful enough to reveal bacteria, every diagnosis depended upon what the eye could see and what experience suggested. The invisible remained unknowable. Around noon, conversation once again turns toward distant ports. This time, the stories seem more detailed. A cloth merchant claims that ships arriving from the eastern Mediterranean have encountered unusual delays because several harbors refuse entry to unfamiliar vessels. Another insists entire crews have reportedly become sick before reaching shore. Someone dismisses the reports immediately. Sailors invent tales every season. Several people laugh. Sailors, indeed, possess a reputation for exaggeration. Storms become monsters. Pirates become entire fleets. Minor fevers become legendary curses. Yet even exaggerated stories often begin with a small fragment of truth. As the afternoon passes, you leave the market briefly to deliver supplies toward one of the city's monasteries. The stone buildings stand quietly behind thick walls shaded by ancient trees. Birds nest beneath tiled roofs, while bees drift lazily between carefully tended medicinal gardens. The air here feels different, calmer. The hurried voices of the marketplace fade into distant echoes. Inside the herb garden, neat rows of plants grow under careful supervision. Mint, fennel, sage, valerian, yarrow, wormwood, and dozens of other species occupy their assigned places with remarkable order. Each serves some medicinal purpose according to generations of accumulated knowledge. A young novice explains proudly that many remedies have been copied from manuscripts older than anyone alive. Some originated in ancient Rome. Others came from scholars living hundreds of miles away across lands most villagers will never see. Knowledge itself travels much like merchants, slowly, patiently, crossing borders one manuscript at a time. Nearby, an elderly brother carefully copies another medical text onto fresh parchment. Every letter demands complete concentration. A single page may consume an entire day. Producing one complete volume requires months, sometimes years. Books remain precious because each one represents extraordinary labor. Printing presses do not yet exist. Every manuscript is written by hand, every illustration painted individually. Every correction requires painstaking effort. These books preserve humanity's best understanding of disease. Sadly, they also preserve many misunderstandings that future generations will eventually replace. Leaving the monastery behind, you continue along the city wall, where travelers regularly arrive before sunset, hopping to secure entry before the gates close. Today's arrivals appear tired. One family pushes a handcart containing nearly everything they own. A shepherd drives several sheep toward market. 3 students wearing worn cloaks debate philosophy while sharing a loaf of bread. And then another wagon appears. Its driver looks exhausted, not merely from travel, from worry. When questioned by the guards, he hesitates before answering. There was sickness. The words are spoken quietly, almost reluctantly. Nearby, conversations stop. "What kind of sickness?" asks one guard. The traveler shakes his head. "I don't know. People developed fevers. Some had terrible swellings. They died quickly." Another guard frowns. "Where?" The driver names a settlement several days away. Not close, but closer than yesterday's rumors. The guards exchange uncertain glances before allowing the wagon inside. No laws require isolation. No established system exists for identifying dangerous outbreaks before they spread. Such ideas belong largely to the future. For now, life continues. Yet something subtle has changed. People begin watching strangers more carefully. An unfamiliar cough attracts brief attention. A traveler wiping sweat from his forehead receives an extra glance. Fear does not yet dominate the city, but curiosity has quietly transformed into unease. That evening, the inn feels noticeably quieter than before. Fewer jokes echo through the common room. Conversations remain lower. The old merchant you met previously stirs his stew thoughtfully before speaking. "When I was young," he says, "my grandfather told me that sickness moves like smoke." Several listeners look up. You cannot always see where it begins. You only notice when the whole room is filled. No one laughs this time. Outside, the wind strengthens. Clouds drift across the moon, covering the streets in alternating bands of darkness and silver light. Wooden signs creak gently above closed shops, while distant dogs bark somewhere beyond the city walls. You lie awake longer than usual. The mattress remains uncomfortable. The room remains crowded. Nothing tangible has changed. Yet your thoughts wander repeatedly toward the wagon driver. Terrible swellings, high fevers, quick deaths. The descriptions remain vague, too vague to inspire certainty, yet oddly specific enough to resist dismissal. Across Europe, thousands of communities retire for the night exactly as this one does. Families finish their evening prayers. Candles burn lower. Children drift into peaceful sleep, unaware that history is quietly gathering momentum beyond their horizons. Within castles, nobles discuss politics. Inside monasteries, monks continue copying sacred texts. Along rivers, fishermen prepare tomorrow's nets. Across forests, charcoal burners tend slow-burning fires. Life unfolds according to familiar rhythms that have remained unchanged for generations. No one imagines those rhythms are about to be interrupted by one of the most devastating chapters the medieval world will ever witness. And when that interruption finally arrives, it will force physicians, priests, kings, peasants, merchants, and scholars alike to confront a terrifying truth. Some enemies cannot be negotiated with, some cannot be seen, and some leave behind a silence far more haunting than the noise of any battlefield. The next morning greets the city with an unusual stillness. Not complete silence, for medieval towns are never truly quiet, but a softer rhythm than before. The bells still ring from the church tower, announcing the first hour after sunrise. Bakers still tend their ovens, feeding them with bundles of dry oak. Horses still stamp impatiently in their stalls, eager to begin another day's work. Yet beneath those familiar sounds lies an unmistakable tension, as though everyone is waiting for news that has not yet arrived. The sky overhead is perfectly clear. A cool breeze drifts across the rooftops, carrying the scent of damp earth from the surrounding countryside. Beyond the walls, fields ripple gently beneath the wind. Harvest workers bend over rows of grain, their movements slow and methodical. From this distance, the world appears peaceful enough to belong in an illuminated manuscript. It is easy to forget how fragile that peace truly is. You spend the morning repairing broken sacks inside the warehouse. coarse linen has worn thin after countless journeys over rough roads, and every tier must be stitched carefully before the next shipment arrives. Beside you, another laborer hums an old folk tune that his father once sang while working the fields. The melody is simple, repeating itself every few moments, but somehow it makes the work feel lighter. As your hands move steadily through the cloth, you overhear two merchants discussing the routes that connect Europe's great trading cities. One traces an imaginary map across the wooden table with a calloused finger. From the eastern ports, he says, the ships sail west. They reach the islands, then the mainland, then every market where goods can be sold. His companion nods thoughtfully. Silk, pepper, salt, well, everything travels. Neither man realizes that their list is incomplete. History would later reveal that commerce carried far more than precious cargo. The same vessels that transported spices worth fortunes also sheltered countless rats hidden deep within the darkness below deck. They lived among sacks of grain, coils of rope, wooden barrels, and crates packed tightly against one another. Sailors regarded them as an irritating but ordinary part of life at sea. No captain expected them to change history. No merchant imagined they might become unwilling companions in a disaster stretching across continents. The people of medieval Europe certainly noticed rats. Nearly every town had them. Granaries attracted them. Markets fed them. Ships carried them. Cats hunted them whenever possible. Yet they were considered a nuisance rather than a mystery. Few suspected that creatures so common could become connected to one of humanity's greatest catastrophes. By midday, a traveling friar arrives at the marketplace. Dust covers the hem of his brown robe, evidence of many miles walked beneath the summer sun. His sandals appear badly worn, and the leather satchel hanging from his shoulder has clearly been repaired several times. Crowds naturally gather around travelers. News remains one of the most valuable commodities in any medieval town. Letters move slowly. Printed newspapers do not exist. Most information spreads through conversations, exactly like this one. The friar accepts a cup of water before answering the questions everyone wishes to ask. How are the southern roads? He pauses. Busy. What of the ports? Another pause. There is concern. Concern, a remarkably small word. Yet sometimes the smallest words carry the greatest weight. Someone asks whether the rumors are true. The friar folds his hands together before replying. I visited a town where the church bell rang more often than usual. No one speaks. I helped bury several people. Still silence. Were they old? Someone asks. Some, and the others. The friar lowers his eyes. Not all. His answer leaves the marketplace, strangely subdued. Death among the elderly surprises no one. Death among healthy adults belongs to another category. entirely. Life expectancy in medieval Europe is often misunderstood. Many people die young, especially infants and small children. Yet those who survive childhood can often live into their 50s or beyond. Entire villages depend upon strong men and women working fields, raising families, building homes, and caring for aging parents. When illness begins striking adults in the prime of life, communities quickly recognize that something unusual is happening. No physician needs modern statistics to notice such a change. Experience alone makes it obvious. Later that afternoon, you accompany another worker delivering flour to a nearby convent. Along the way, you pass a small cemetery enclosed by a low stone wall. Freshly turned earth marks several recent burials. Death is never far away in the medieval world. Few people expect to reach old age without losing parents, siblings, friends, spouses, or children. Funerals occur often enough to become woven into the ordinary fabric of life. Yet each grave still represents an individual story. A child whose laughter once filled a courtyard, a carpenter whose hands shaped countless homes, a grandmother who remembered seasons long forgotten by everyone else. History sometimes reduces tragedy to numbers. Thousands dead, millions lost, entire regions devastated. But every number once possessed a face. Every statistic once belonged to someone who woke one ordinary morning, believing tomorrow would arrive exactly as expected. At the convent, several sisters prepare food for poor families unable to provide for themselves. Large iron pots simmer gently above open fires, while loaves of dark bread cool upon wooden tables. One elderly sister smiles warmly as she hands a bowl of stew to a hungry widow, accompanied by two small children. Charity remains one of the few dependable forms of social support available. There are no hospitals in the modern sense, no public health departments, no emergency medical services. Communities survive largely because neighbors help one another whenever possible. Monasteries and convents frequently become places where the sick, the elderly, and the poor receive whatever care can be offered. Sometimes that care saves lives. Sometimes it merely eases suffering. Either way, compassion itself becomes a form of medicine. As evening approaches, clouds gather unexpectedly over the western hills. The air grows heavy, carrying the unmistakable scent of another approaching storm. You quicken your pace toward the inn just as the first raindrops begin striking the dusty road. Within minutes, rain falls steadily across the city. People hurry beneath awnings. Merchants cover their goods with canvas. Children laugh while splashing through puddles before frustrated parents pull them indoors. Thunder rolls across the countryside. For a brief moment, nature commands everyone's attention. Storms possess remarkable power to interrupt human worries. When lightning flashes overhead, Rumors about distant illness seem almost less immediate. Almost. Inside the inn, travelers gather around the fireplace earlier than usual. The flames dance across weathered faces, while rain drums steadily against the roof. A blacksmith tells stories of impossible horses he once shoed for noblemen. A shepherd argues that mountain weather changes faster than any king can make laws. Gradually, laughter returns, not because fear has disappeared, because people cannot remain afraid every waking hour. Human beings possess an extraordinary ability to continue living even while uncertainty surrounds them. An old woman seated near the fire begins spinning wool into thread with practiced hands. The spindle turns smoothly, round and round. Its quiet rhythm somehow calms the room. She speaks without looking up. "When I was little," she says, "my grandmother taught me something." Several listeners glance toward her. She said, "Every generation believes its troubles are the worst." A young apprentice smiles. Was she right? The old woman considers the question. For many years, yes. Her spindle continues turning, but every so often, she stops. History proves everyone wrong. No one answers. The fire crackles softly. Outside, rain continues washing the streets clean. Somewhere beyond the city walls, another wagon slowly makes its way north through the darkness. Its passengers hope only to reach shelter before dawn. They cannot know that every mile traveled brings them closer to communities still unaware of what follows behind. And somewhere far away, in another town whose name you have never heard, a physician bends over a patient unlike any he has treated before. The fever refuses to break. The swelling grows larger. The prayers become more desperate. For the first time, even the most experienced healers begin to suspect they are facing something that does not fit comfortably within the knowledge passed down by their teachers. The medieval world is still sleeping peacefully, but the first whispers of its longest nightmare have already begun. Dawn breaks beneath a veil of low gray clouds that seem reluctant to release the sun. The light spreads slowly across the countryside, revealing fields heavy with late summer grain and narrow roads already marked by the tracks of countless wagons. A cool mist lingers over the nearby river, softening the outlines of trees until they appear almost like ghosts standing silently along the water's edge. From the tower of the parish church comes the familiar peal of bells. Their steady rhythm has measured the lives of this town for generations. They announce prayer. They announce weddings. They announce market days. They announce funerals. The same bronze bells celebrate joy and mourn sorrow without changing their voice. To the people below, they are as dependable as sunrise itself. You leave the inn carrying a small piece of rye bread wrapped in cloth. It is not much of a breakfast, but it is enough to quiet the sharpest hunger until midday. Around you, the streets slowly fill once more with craftsmen opening their workshops. A cooper rolls finished barrels into the sunlight. A weaver hangs dyed cloth outside his shop, where passing customers can admire its rich colors. The blacksmith's forge glows orange before the rest of the market has fully awakened. Watching them, it becomes almost impossible to believe that anything extraordinary could disturb such ordinary routines. History often hides its greatest turning points inside the most familiar mornings. A child laughs while chasing a stray goose. Two elderly men argue over the price of oats. A woman pauses to straighten the hood, covering her infant before continuing toward the well. Each small moment feels timeless. Centuries later, historians would describe this era using words like asterisk catastrophe, asterisk pandemic, and collapse, asterisk. Yet none of those words exist in the minds of the people living through these quiet hours. They know only today's chores, today's weather, and today's worries. Near the marketplace, you notice several physicians gathered beneath the covered entrance of an apothecary. Such meetings are uncommon. Doctors usually work alone or with a small apprentice. Seeing several of them speaking together immediately attracts curious glances from passers-by. You cannot hear every word. Only fragments drift through the morning air. Persistent fever, reports from the coast, no common pattern, perhaps corrupted air. One physician, noticeably older than the others, strokes his gray beard thoughtfully before pointing toward the sky. The summer has been unusually damp. Another nods. Moisture breeds unhealthy vapors. The others murmur in agreement. Their discussion reflects one of medieval Europe's most respected medical ideas. Many believed that foul or poisoned air, known later as miasma, could bring terrible illness. Swamps, rotting waste, stagnant water, and decaying bodies were all thought capable of releasing dangerous vapors that entered the lungs and disturbed the body's natural balance. To modern readers, the theory seems mistaken, yet it emerged from genuine observation. Places with unpleasant smells often did have higher rates of disease, though for reasons physicians could not possibly understand. Without knowledge of microorganisms, the odor itself appeared to be the obvious culprit. Human beings naturally search for explanations. Even imperfect explanations feel less frightening than complete ignorance. As the morning progresses, a caravan enters the city carrying expensive cloth from distant markets. The brightly colored fabrics immediately attract wealthy customers eager to examine their quality. The merchants smile politely despite obvious exhaustion. Long-distance trade demands remarkable endurance. Weeks become months. Roads disappear beneath snow. Bridges collapse. Bandits threaten isolated travelers. Storms delay ships. Yet commerce continues because kingdoms depend upon it. The prosperity of medieval Europe flows along these roads as surely as rivers carry water toward the sea. The caravan leader pays the city toll before directing his men toward a warehouse as workers begin unloading valuable cargo. A stable boy notices something darting beneath one of the wagons. A rat, he mutters. No one pays much attention. Another appears moments later, before vanishing beneath stacked barrels. Again, no one reacts. They have seen rats every day of their lives. Children sometimes chase them. Cats occasionally catch them. Granary workers complain about them constantly. Nothing about their presence seems remarkable. If anyone had suggested that these small creatures might become connected with unimaginable suffering, they would likely have laughed in disbelief. The greatest threats rarely introduce themselves dramatically. Sometimes they scurry unnoticed beneath a wagon wheel. By afternoon, the market square grows crowded enough that movement becomes slow. Voices overlap from every direction until individual conversations blend into a constant murmur. A spice merchant invites customers to smell cinnamon, recently imported from lands farther east than most people can imagine. Nearby, a tanner displays freshly cured leather. A potter carefully arranges glazed bowls upon a wooden table. The variety of goods reminds you that medieval Europe is far less isolated than future generations often assume. Ideas travel, pilgrims travel, merchants travel, scholars travel, so do diseases, although no one recognizes the connection. Yet, every successful trade route also forms an invisible pathway linking thousands of communities together. Distance alone offers surprisingly little protection. Toward the edge of the square, you notice an elderly woman sitting quietly beside a basket of dried flowers and fragrant herbs. Unlike the younger herbalist, whose stall always attracts crowds, she rarely calls out to passing customers. Instead, people come to her because of her reputation. She has delivered bobbies, prepared remedies, comforted the dying, listened to countless fears that no physician could easily answer. Her knowledge comes not from universities, but from a lifetime of careful observation. You purchase a small bundle of dried lavender simply because its scent reminds you of home. As she wraps it in cloth, she studies your face. You've been listening to the rumors. It is not a question. You nod. So has everyone else. She smiles faintly. Rumors spread faster than truth. After a brief pause, she adds another thought. But sometimes, she ties the cloth carefully. Truth spends a few days trying to catch up. The words remain with you long after you leave. By late afternoon, clouds begin gathering once again over the western hills, though no rain falls. Instead, the air grows strangely warm and still. Even the birds seem quieter. Swallows that normally circle above the rooftops disappear into sheltered places beneath the eaves. Farmers returning through the city gates mention that livestock behaved unusually during the day. Perhaps they sensed the changing weather, or perhaps people simply notice unusual details more readily. When anxiety already occupies their thoughts. The human mind has always searched for patterns. Sometimes it finds genuine warnings. Other times, it creates connections where none exist. As evening settles across the town, candles begin appearing behind small windows one by one, like scattered stars brought down to earth. Families gather around modest suppers. Stew bubbles gently over hearth fires. Fresh bread is divided carefully so that nothing goes to waste. Children tell their parents about the day's adventures, transforming ordinary events into heroic tales through the limitless imagination of youth. For a little while, the outside world feels wonderfully distant. Inside, every home exists its own small universe, its own routines, its own hopes, its own belief that tomorrow will resemble today. Few realize how quickly that illusion can disappear. At the inn, conversation turns toward a physician in a neighboring town who reportedly encountered several patients suffering from unusually high fevers. The details remain uncertain. One traveler insists they recovered. Another claims they did not. A third argues the entire story has grown larger with every retelling. That, too, is part of history. Information changes as it travels. Facts become guesses. Guesses become certainty. Certainty becomes legend. Separating truth from rumor often proves nearly impossible while events are still unfolding. The fire burns lower as the evening grows late. Guests gradually retire upstairs until only a handful remain in the common room. The innkeeper quietly wipes wooden tables before extinguishing several lamps to conserve oil. Outside, the street's empty beneath a moon hidden behind drifting clouds. A watchman begins his nightly patrol, carrying a lantern whose warm glow reaches only a few steps into the darkness. He pauses occasionally to listen. The distant bark of a dog, the creak of a swinging sign, the whisper of wind between narrow alleys. Everything sounds perfectly ordinary. Miles away, however, another bell begins to ring, not for evening prayer, not for a wedding, not to celebrate a feast day. It rings because another family has lost someone unexpectedly. Then, before the echoes have fully faded, it rings again. And somewhere beyond that village, in another community connected by the same roads, another bell answers. The people hearing those bells cannot yet know it, but they are listening to the opening notes of a tragedy that will soon echo across an entire continent, until nearly every town, monastery, castle, and humble village will hear that same solemn sound far more often than anyone ever believed possible. The first rays of sunlight creep slowly across the eastern horizon, painting the stone walls of the city with soft shades of gold. For a brief while, the rooftops glow warmly, and the smoke rising from hundreds of chimneys drifts lazily into the still morning air. The previous day's worries seem almost distant beneath such peaceful light. It is remarkable how quickly hope returns after a quiet night, as long as dawn arrives without disaster. People naturally begin believing that yesterday's fears may have been exaggerated. The market opens as it always has. Wooden stalls unfold one after another, until the square becomes a maze of merchants arranging their goods with practiced efficiency. Fishmongers spread fresh catches over damp cloth. Potters carefully stack bowls and jugs so that none will crack if a customer reaches too eagerly. Butchers sharpen heavy knives against smooth whetstones, while apprentices sweep away yesterday's dust before customers begin arriving. You pause beside a bread stall where warm loaves are disappearing almost as quickly as they emerge from the oven. The baker smiles wearily. Busy morning. It always is. He wipes flour from his hands before leaning a little closer. But people are buying more than usual. For winter. He shakes his head. I don't think so. His eyes drift toward the growing crowd. They seem uneasy. You notice it now that he has mentioned it. Several customers purchase 2 loaves instead of 1. A woman quietly asks whether more flour will arrive next week. An elderly man requests extra salt, explaining that it keeps well if stored carefully. None of these actions seem unusual by themselves. Together, however, they suggest that uncertainty has begun influencing ordinary decisions. Fear rarely transforms society overnight. Instead, it changes countless small habits. People store a little more food, travel a little less often, watch strangers a little more carefully, lock their doors a little earlier each evening. These subtle changes accumulate until daily life no longer resembles what it once was. Leaving the marketplace, you wander toward the quarter where craftsmen maintain their workshops. The rhythmic tapping of hammers echoes from every direction. Inside one building, a cooper fits iron hoops around freshly made barrels. Next door, a wheelwright shapes curved sections of oak into sturdy wagon wheels capable of surviving rough roads. Farther along, a bookbinder carefully stitches parchment pages together using waxed thread, creating volumes that may survive for centuries if treated with care. Every trade depends upon another. The cooper needs the blacksmith. The blacksmith needs the charcoal burner. The charcoal burner depends upon woodcutters. The woodcutters rely upon farmers for food. Medieval society functions like an enormous woven cloth. Each thread strengthens the others. Yet woven cloth possesses one weakness. Damage to one section eventually affects the entire fabric. Disease will soon reveal just how closely every community depends upon every other. Around midday, you encounter a young messenger leading an exhausted horse through the streets. His cloak bears the emblem of a nearby lord. The animal's flanks glisten with sweat despite the cool weather. Clearly, both rider and horse have traveled with unusual urgency. He disappears into the residence of one of the city's wealthiest merchants. Within minutes, servants begin carrying letters toward several prominent households. The contents remain unknown. Speculation begins immediately. Has war been declared? Has a nobleman died? Has another harvest failed? Human imagination often fills empty spaces faster than facts ever can. By afternoon, whispers spread that officials in several neighboring towns have begun paying closer attention to travelers arriving from distant regions. No one describes these measures as restrictions. Rather, they are presented as sensible precautions. Questions become more detailed. Where have you come from? How long have you been traveling? Did anyone in your village fall ill? Most travelers answer without complaint. Such questions seem harmless enough. After all, communities have always been cautious about unfamiliar strangers. Yet these simple conversations represent something quietly significant. People are beginning to suspect that movement itself might matter. They do not know why. They do not know how. But instinct often notices patterns long before science explains them. Later that day, you visit the monastery once again to deliver sacks of grain promised several weeks earlier. The brothers receive the shipment gratefully. Winter preparations have already begun. Storehouses must be filled, firewood stacked, medicinal herbs dried before autumn arrives. Inside the scriptorium, rows of monks continue copying manuscripts beneath tall windows that admit gentle afternoon light. The scratching of quills creates a soothing rhythm, broken only by the occasional turning of parchment pages. An elderly scholar notices your curiosity. He invites you to examine one of the books, resting carefully upon a wooden desk. Its pages contain illustrations of the human body, unlike anything you have seen before. Simple drawings show veins, organs, bones, and carefully labeled notes written in elegant Latin. The scholar smiles. Knowledge grows slowly. He runs a finger gently along the edge of the manuscript. Each generation receives what the previous one discovered and adds something new. You ask whether medicine has changed much during his lifetime. A little, not enough. He closes the book thoughtfully. There are still illnesses that humble every physician. His words linger in your mind. Every age believes it understands the world reasonably well. Then nature presents another mystery. The history of medicine is not merely a story of brilliant discoveries. It is also a story of repeated humility. Every unanswered question reminds humanity that there is always more to learn. As evening approaches, clouds gather once more, though they remain high enough that the setting sun paints them brilliant shades of crimson and amber. The entire western sky seems ablaze. People pause in the streets simply to admire the view. Even those burdened by worry cannot entirely resist the beauty of an extraordinary sunset. For several precious minutes, conversation shifts away from rumors. Children point excitedly toward the glowing horizon. A young couple walks slowly along the city wall, saying very little. An old soldier remarks that he has seen skis like this before great storms. Another man laughs gently. You've said that every autumn. The soldier grins. And one year I shall be right. Laughter spreads through those nearby. The tension eases, if only briefly. Back at the inn, supper is livelier than it has been for several evenings. A traveling musician has arrived carrying a small lute polished smooth by years of use. He begins playing familiar melodies that encourage several guests to sing quietly together. For a little while, worries retreat before the comfort of shared music. Stories follow. One merchant recalls becoming lost in alpine snow decades earlier. A fisherman describes a storm that nearly swallowed his boat. An old widow tells everyone about the year wolves wandered frighteningly close to the village because deep winter had emptied the forests of prey. Each tale reminds the listeners that humanity has survived many hardships before. Perhaps these new rumors will become just another story someday. Perhaps, as the fire burns lower, the musician carefully packs away his instrument. The guests gradually retire upstairs until only the innkeeper remains below, placing another log upon the dying embers. Outside, the streets have become almost completely empty. Only the night watchman continues his slow patrol, lantern swinging gently with each measured step. He pauses near the northern gate. Two travelers are requesting entry after dark. Such arrivals are uncommon. The gates usually close before sunset. The watchman calls for the gatekeeper. After a brief discussion, the travelers are admitted. Their wagon carries little besides blankets, cooking pots, and a handful of personal belongings. They appear less like merchants than a family relocating in haste. As they pass beneath the gate, the watchman notices something unusual. One of the children coughs repeatedly, not a violent cough, not even an alarming one, simply persistent. The mother apologizes. He has been tired since yesterday. The gatekeeper nods sympathetically. Long journeys exhaust children. No one thinks much more about it. The family disappears into the sleeping city in search of shelter. The gates close once again. Heavy wooden beams slide firmly into place. Outside the walls, darkness settles over the empty road. Inside, hundreds of people sleep peacefully, unaware that history sometimes enters not with armies, banners, or trumpets, but quietly through an ordinary gate beside an ordinary wagon, carrying what appears to be nothing more unusual than a tired family searching for a safe place to spend the night. The city wakes to the familiar chorus of another medieval morning. Bells ring from the church tower, just as they have every day for longer than anyone alive can remember. The deep notes drift across tiled roofs, over narrow streets, and into the surrounding countryside, where farmers are already guiding oxen through fields softened by recent rain. A gentle breeze carries the smell of fresh bread through the marketplace. For a moment, everything feels reassuringly ordinary. The family that entered through the northern gate the previous night has found shelter in a modest corner of the inn's stable loft. They arrived with little more than a handcart, a weary horse, and several blankets wrapped tightly around their belongings. Their youngest son, the one who had coughed during the night, appears pale but cheerful enough as he sits outside eating a piece of coarse bread while watching pigeons gather around scattered grain. Children possess an extraordinary ability to make adults believe that everything will be all right, even after a difficult journey. They often return to laughter long before their parents do. The boy chases one particularly bold pigeon across the courtyard until his mother gently calls him back. She smiles apologetically at the innkeeper. He never stays still. The innkeeper chuckles. That's usually a good sign. No one gives the matter another thought. Inside the common room, breakfast is simple. Dark bread, goat cheese, thin ale, a pot of porridge shared among several travelers. Conversation begins with the weather before drifting once again toward the roads. One merchant has decided to postpone his journey south. Just for a week, he explains. I'd rather hear more news first. Another shakes his head. If everyone waits, nothing will ever reach the markets. The debate remains friendly. Trade depends upon confidence. Without confidence, wagons remain in barns, ships stay in harbor, and marketplaces slowly empty. For centuries, merchants have accepted danger as part of their profession. Bandits can be avoided. Storms can sometimes be outsailed. Broken wagons can be repaired. Disease is different. It cannot be negotiated with. It asks no one's permission before joining the journey. You finish your meal and return to the grain warehouse. The morning passes much as the previous ones have. Wagons arrive in steady succession, their wheels coated with layers of dried mud collected from villages scattered across the countryside. One wagon carries sacks of barley. Another brings oats. A third delivers rye, harvested only days earlier. The grain master checks each shipment carefully. Moisture, weight, signs of spoilage. Every sack matters. A single moldy shipment can ruin hundreds of others if stored carelessly. The responsibility weighs heavily upon him. Food is the city's insurance against winter. As laborers unload another cart, something small darts across the warehouse floor. Then another. Rats, the warehouse cat, immediately springs into action, disappearing beneath stacked sacks with surprising speed. Several workers laugh. She'll earn her supper today. Within moments, the cat reappears carrying one unfortunate rat firmly between her jaws. The laborers cheer. The cat accepts their praise with complete indifference before disappearing once more. Scenes like this occur almost daily. No one considers them remarkable. Granaries throughout Europe wage an endless battle against rodents. Sometimes the rats win, sometimes the cats. It is simply another part of life. By late morning, the city physician receives an unexpected visitor. A messenger from a neighboring town waits patiently outside his home, while the physician gathers several books, bundles of herbs, and a few carefully wrapped instruments. The messenger explains only that another doctor has requested assistance. No further details are offered. The physician nods gravely. Within half an hour, both men are riding toward the western road, watching them disappear into the distance. Several townspeople exchange uncertain glances. Physicians rarely travel without reason. Word spreads quickly. Perhaps a nobleman has become ill. Perhaps there has been an accident. Perhaps the possibilities multiply with every retelling. By afternoon, the marketplace buzzes with speculation stronger than ever before. Rumors now arrive from multiple directions. A trader from the coast insists that several ports have begun inspecting incoming ships more carefully than usual. A pilgrim claims one monastery has suspended its annual gathering. A blacksmith dismisses both stories as nonsense. My grandfather always said people enjoy frightening themselves. The others laugh politely, yet even the blacksmith glances toward every new arrival entering the square. Confidence and concern now exist side by side. Neither has fully defeated the other. Near the fountain, a traveling storyteller gathers a small audience of children. Rather than speaking of distant sickness, he entertains them with tales of clever foxes, wandering knights, and dragons sleeping beneath forgotten hills. The children listen with wide eyes. Their laughter echoes between the buildings. Adults slow their pace just long enough to smile. Stories have always served another purpose beyond entertainment. They remind people that wonder still exists, even during uncertain times. For an hour, the square feels lighter, less burdened, more like the thriving marketplace it has always been. As the storyteller packs away his belongings, an elderly woman approaches him. "You've traveled far." He nods. "Far enough." She studies his face. "Have the roads changed?" He thinks carefully before answering. "The roads are the same." Another pause. "The people upon them are changing." She asks what he means. They ask different questions now. What kind of questions? He adjusts the strap of his satchel. They no longer ask where you've been. They ask whether anyone there was sick. The old woman says nothing. She simply nods. It is a subtle observation, yet perhaps one of the most important. Communities across Europe are beginning to think differently, not because they understand disease, because experience is quietly teaching them that news of illness travels alongside travelers themselves. The explanation remains elusive. The pattern is becoming impossible to ignore. Toward evening, you climb the city wall with several workers after completing the day's labor. From this height, The surrounding countryside stretches endlessly toward distant forests, darkening beneath the setting sun. Roads wind gently through the landscape like pale ribbons. Occasionally, a wagon appears upon one of them, moving so slowly that it seems almost motionless from afar. Looking down upon those roads, it becomes easier to appreciate how connected the medieval world has become. Every path links one village to another. Every bridge joins communities separated by rivers. Every market draws strangers together. Isolation grows increasingly rare. Prosperity has woven countless settlements into a single vast network. None of its builders intended that network to carry suffering. History often reminds humanity that the same inventions capable of spreading opportunity can also spread danger. As darkness approaches, the watchmen light iron baskets filled with burning pitch above each city gate. Their flames flicker brightly against the growing twilight, serving both as illumination and as reassurance to those returning home before the gates close. The familiar routine comforts everyone. Routine always does. Inside the inn, supper is quieter than the night before. The traveling musician has already continued his journey. Without music, conversations seem to settle naturally into thoughtful silence. The family that arrived yesterday eats together near the fireplace. The youngest boy coughs once or twice between mouthfuls of stew. His mother gently touches his forehead. "You've been running too much." The boy smiles. "I'm fine." Children often insist upon perfect health, even while exhausted. Parents usually recognize the difference. She encourages him to finish his meal before sending him upstairs early. The father remains by the fire a little longer. Another traveler asks where they have come from. "A village near the southern trade road." "And why leave?" The man stares into the flames. "Our harvest failed." It is a believable answer. Poor harvests force countless families to relocate in search of work. No one presses further. Eventually, the fire burns lower. Guests climb the narrow wooden staircase, one by one, until only glowing embers illuminate the common room. Outside, the wind has fallen completely still. No leaves rustle. No shutters creak. The silence feels unusually deep, far beyond the sleeping town. Another physician rides through the darkness, carrying every remedy he knows. Ahead of him waits a patient whose symptoms refuse to resemble anything described in his treasured manuscripts. Behind him, another messenger races toward a different town with another urgent request. One doctor becomes two. Two become five. Five become dozens. The requests are still scattered, still isolated, still easy to dismiss as unfortunate coincidences. But somewhere beyond the horizon, those isolated points are slowly beginning to connect. And once enough of them join together, Europe will awaken to the terrifying realization that it is no longer facing a collection of separate illnesses, but the opening wave of something vast enough to to change the course of history itself. The sun rises behind a curtain of thin clouds, casting a gentle silver light across the countryside instead of the brilliant gold that has greeted the previous mornings. The city slowly emerges from the fatting darkness. Chimneys release thin streams of smoke into the cool air. Stable doors swing open as horses are led toward the watering troughs. Shopkeepers lift heavy wooden shutters, revealing shelves that have been carefully arranged before dawn. The rhythm of another ordinary day begins. If someone had walked through these streets without hearing the recent rumors, nothing would seem unusual. The cobbler still sits outside his workshop, stitching worn boots that have traveled hundreds of miles. The brewer still rolls heavy barrels toward the tavern. The washerwomen still kneel beside the riverbank, beating damp linen against smooth stones with practiced determination. Life insists upon continuing. It always does. You arrive at the warehouse shortly after sunrise, expecting another morning of unloading grain. Instead, the foreman points toward a different task. The monastery needs firewood. Winter preparations cannot wait. Several wagons loaded with split oak logs must be delivered before evening. You join a small group of laborers, leading the wagons through the winding streets toward the monastery gates. The journey is slow. Heavy wheels struggle over uneven stones. Pedestrians step aside politely before continuing their own errands. As you pass through the marketplace, you notice something subtle. There are just a few fewer travelers than there were only days ago. Not enough for most people to remark upon, yet enough to be felt. Several stalls that normally welcome merchants from distant towns remain empty. The spaces stand quietly between neighboring vendors, like missing teeth. One cloth merchant notices you looking. Perhaps they'll arrive tomorrow. His voice sounds hopeful. Whether he believes his own words is difficult to tell. At the monastery, the brothers greet the delivery warmly. Winter consumes enormous quantities of firewood. Cooking, heating, baking, brewing medicines. Every task depends upon a steady supply of fuel. As the logs are stacked neatly beneath a covered shelter, Brother Matthew, a kindly monk with silver hair and weathered hands, invites you to share a mug of warm barley broth before returning to the city. You gladly accept. The monastery feels strangely peaceful compared with the crowded streets beyond its walls. Birdsong fills the gardens. Bees drift lazily among flowering herbs. Somewhere inside, voices rise together in quiet prayer before fading once more into silence. Brother Matthew notices your gaze lingering on the medicinal garden. Our herbs have done well this year. Rows of sage, rosemary, mint, fennel, and lavender sway gently in the breeze. Do they cure many illnesses? You ask. The old monk smiles thoughtfully. They comfort many illnesses. The distinction catches your attention. He continues, sometimes comfort is all we are able to offer. He bends to examine a cluster of time before adding another observation. People often imagine physicians possess certainty. He chuckles softly. We possess hope. We possess experience. But certainty, he gently shakes his head, belongs to God alone. His words linger with you long after you leave. Modern people often imagine medieval medicine as confident in its mistakes. The truth was far more humble. Many physicians understood the limits of their knowledge remarkably well. They debated treatments, questioned outcomes, recorded failures alongside successes. Their world contained mysteries they simply could not solve. As the wagons return toward the city, you pass a small roadside shrine where several travelers have paused to pray before continuing their journeys. Pilgrimages remain an important part of medieval life. Some travelers seek healing, others fulfill vows made during difficult times. Many simply hope that sacred places might bring peace to troubled hearts. The roads of Europe are never empty. Merchants, pilgrims, students, messengers, soldiers, craftsmen, every day they move from town to town, carrying stories, skills, languages, customs, and news. Civilization grows stronger because people remain connected. Yet connection always carries unseen consequences. By midday, the city square is alive once again. A troupe of entertainers has arrived, drawing cheerful crowds with trained dogs capable of performing astonishing tricks. Children clap enthusiastically as one small terrier balances carefully upon a narrow wooden beam before leaping through a hoop. For several minutes, laughter completely replaces anxious conversation. Even the stern town guards struggle to hide their smiles. Moments like these matter. History often focuses upon suffering, while overlooking humanity's determination to preserve joy. Even during uncertain times, people continue celebrating birthdays, falling in love, telling jokes, teaching children, planting gardens. Hope survives because ordinary life refuses to surrender easily. While watching the performance, you overhear two merchants discussing a letter delivered earlier that morning. The council in another town has postponed next month's fair because of sickness. So they say. The second merchant folds his arms. That fair has been held every autumn for longer than my father could remember. His companion nods. Exactly. Seasonal fairs are more than celebrations. They are economic lifelines. Farmers sell livestock. Craftsmen find new customers. Merchants negotiate contracts lasting an entire year. Postponing such an event represents a serious decision. It suggests that concern has grown beyond simple rumor. Still, no one knows the complete truth. Not yet. In the afternoon, the physician who departed 2 days earlier finally returns. His horse walks slowly through the western gate, visibly exhausted. Dust coats his cloak from shoulders to boots. Several townspeople recognize him immediately. They gather politely, careful not to appear overly curious. How was your journey? The physician removes his gloves before answering. Long. Were many people ill? He hesitates. Enough. The crowd grows quieter. What illness? Another pause. I cannot yet say. Those 4 words settle heavily upon everyone listening. I cannot yet say. For a physician to admit uncertainty is not unusual. For him to sound troubled by that uncertainty is something altogether different. He offers no dramatic speeches, no frightening predictions, only quiet honesty. I have written several observations. I hope to compare them with older records. Someone asks whether the illness is spreading. The physician studies the faces around him before replying carefully. I have seen cases in more than one place. It is neither reassurance nor alarm, simply fact. Sometimes facts alone are unsettling enough. As evening approaches, rain begins falling once again. A gentle, steady rain, not violent enough to drive everyone indoors immediately. Instead, people continue walking beneath woolen cloaks, while merchants cover their goods with oiled cloth. The rain softens every sound. Hoofbeats become quieter, voices more distant. The city seems wrapped inside a gray curtain, separating it from the rest of the world. Inside the inn, guests gather around the fireplace earlier than usual. Steam rises from damp cloaks, hung carefully to dry. The youngest boy from the traveling family sleeps soundly upstairs. His cough has become less frequent during the day, encouraging his parents to believe that simple rest is restoring his strength. His father smiles with visible relief. Children recover quickly. Several guests agree. They have all seen youngsters bounce back from fevers that would leave adults bedridden for days. No one wishes to imagine otherwise. Near the hearth, the old merchant slowly unfolds his map once more. He traces the familiar trade routes without speaking. This time, however, another traveler notices. You study those roads often. The merchant nods. I've spent my life upon them. Do they worry you now? He looks into the fire before answering. The roads have never changed. He carefully folds the map again, but I think the stories traveling along them have. Outside, the rain continues through the night. It washes dust from rooftops, fills wagon ruts with shallow pools, feeds the rivers that connect distant kingdoms. Somewhere downstream, a ship is preparing to dock at another bustling port. Its sailors are eager to stretch their legs after weeks at sea. Its cargo promises handsome profits. Its arrival will seem no different from hundreds before it. No trumpets will announce it. No bells will warn the town, because history rarely recognizes the significance of an ordinary arrival until long after the gangplank has been lowered and the first footsteps have already touched the shore. Far to the south, where warmer winds carry the scent of salt across busy harbors, another morning begins beneath a sky of brilliant blue. Unlike the inland town you have come to know, this place wakes to the sound of gulls circling above crowded docks and waves striking the stone quays with patient rhythm. Here, the sea governs life. Ships are the heartbeat of the city. Every sunrise brings new arrivals. Every sunset watches others disappear beyond the horizon. The harbor is already crowded before the first church bell rings. Longshoremen haul coils of rope thicker than a man's arm. Dock officials inspect cargo manifests written in careful Latin. Sailmakers climb rigging to repair torn canvas, while fishermen untangle nets still glistening with seawater from the night's catch. No one stands idle for long. The sea rewards constant labor. It punishes hesitation. Among the dozens of vessels anchored offshore, one merchant ship draws little attention. Its hull bears the marks of a long voyage. Salt has faded the painted emblem near its bow. The sails have been patched more than once. The crew appears tired, though that alone is hardly unusual after weeks at sea. Ships often arrive in worse condition. Storms are common. Food spoils. Fresh water grows stale. Sailors lose weight during difficult crossings. Nothing about this vessel immediately suggests that history is quietly approaching the harbor. As the ship drifts closer to the dock, the harbor master raises a hand in greeting. Several sailors wave back. Another throws a thick mooring rope toward waiting dockworkers. Business proceeds exactly as it has countless times before. Cargo first, questions afterward. The captain steps ashore slowly. His face appears thinner than expected. Dark circles rest beneath weary eyes. The harbor master smiles politely. A long voyage. The captain nods. Long enough. Winds against you. For a while, their conversation begins with ordinary matters. The weather, the currents, the condition of the sea. Only after several moments does the harbor master notice something unusual. Your crew seems small. The captain's eyes drift toward the deck. We buried several men. The harbor master grows quiet. Storm. The captain hesitates. No. The answer hangs between them. No further explanation follows. Around them, labor continues uninterrupted. Barrels roll across wooden planks. Crates of cloth change hands. Scribes record inventories with practiced speed. Few people overhear the brief conversation. Fewer still recognize its significance. At the opposite end of the harbor, a physician has been summoned aboard another vessel. Such visits are not uncommon. Sailors frequently arrive suffering from infected wounds, poor nutrition, broken bones, or fevers brought on by exhausting voyages. Sea travel is dangerous, even without mysterious illness. The physician climbs the narrow gangplank, carrying a leather satchel filled with familiar remedies. Inside are herbs carefully dried months earlier, small glass bottles, bandages, bronze instruments polished until they shine. Experience has taught him to expect almost anything, yet nothing he has studied fully prepares him for what he finds below deck. The air is heavy, not merely with the smell of damp wood and stale seawater, but with something more difficult to describe. Several sailors lie upon rough blankets. One breathes rapidly despite the cool morning. Another stares toward the ceiling with glassy eyes, barely aware of those around him. A third shivers beneath 2 wool blankets, while sweat beads across his forehead. The physician kneels beside the nearest patient. The fever is unmistakable. He has treated many fevers before. This one feels different. The man's pulse races wildly. His skin burns beneath trembling hands. As the physician gently examines him, his fingers pause. Near the man's groin lies a swollen lump, unlike any ordinary injury. Painful, darkened, firm beneath the skin. The patient winces before the physician can press further. When did this appear? Yesterday, or perhaps the day before? The sailor struggles to remember. Time has blurred beneath relentless fever. Another patient bears a similar swelling beneath one arm. A third has one near his neck. Each tells nearly the same story. First exhaustion, then fever, then unbearable pain. The physician says very little. His silence speaks louder than reassurance ever could. He has read descriptions of unusual swellings in ancient manuscripts. He has encountered infected wounds, abscesses, inflamed glands. Yet something about these cases refuses to resemble familiar patterns. He quietly writes several observations upon a sheet of parchment before closing his satchel. Outside, the harbor remains wonderfully alive. Children race between stacks of cargo. Fishmongers bargain enthusiastically with cooks from nearby taverns. A blacksmith repairs damaged anchors, while sparks scatter across the stone pavement. The ordinary world continues only a few yards away from extraordinary events unfolding aboard the ship. History often occupies 2 realities at once. Most people continue living ordinary lives, while a small handful unknowingly witness the beginning of enormous change. Later that afternoon, the physician visits the city's infirmary. It occupies several simple stone buildings maintained by a religious order devoted to caring for travelers, the poor, and the sick. The brothers welcome him warmly. Together, they discuss the sailor's condition. One monk suggests corrupted food. Another wonders whether foul air trapped below deck caused the illness. A third recalls reading about similar fevers affecting soldiers after long campaigns. Each theory seems plausible. None explains everything. The physician carefully copies his notes into a larger journal, already filled with observations collected over many years. He writes methodically: age, occupation, symptoms, duration, possible causes, treatments attempted, results. Medicine advances through careful observation, even when understanding remains. incomplete. Outside the infirmary, bells ring for evening prayer. The sound spreads across the harbor, just as the setting sun transforms the sea into shimmering copper. Merchants begin closing their warehouses. Sailors gather inside crowded taverns eager for warm food after weeks aboard ship. Dock workers count their wages before returning home to waiting families. The harbor appears prosperous, successful, secure. Only a few individuals know that something deeply unusual has arrived. None can yet imagine its full consequences. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away, your own town settles into another peaceful evening. The marketplace grows quiet. The monastery bells announce the final prayers of the day. Brother Matthew tends the herb garden before darkness falls, gently tying several leaning plants to wooden stakes so they will not break if strong winds arrive overnight. The physician, who recently returned from his journey, sits alone beside a candle, comparing fresh notes with older manuscripts spread across his desk. Again and again, he searches for certainty. Again and again, certainty slips beyond his reach. He notices similarities, then differences. Every answer seems to produce another question. Across Europe, other physicians are unknowingly doing precisely the same thing. Separately, alone, each believing that perhaps only their town faces something unusual. None yet realizes that countless others are opening similar books beneath similar candlelight, recording similar observations with growing concern. Knowledge remains fragmented. One city knows only its own story. Another knows only its own patients. The larger picture remains hidden like a tapestry viewed from only a single thread. Outside your inn, the stars emerge one after another across the clear night sky. Travelers pause briefly before retiring to bed. Some study familiar constellations. Others simply enjoy the cool air after another long day. The youngest boy from the southern family sleeps peacefully. His parents finally allow themselves to relax. Tomorrow, they hope, he will be completely well. Sometimes hope proves wonderfully accurate. Sometimes it does not. For now, the continent rests beneath the same blanket of stars, unaware that in harbors, villages, monasteries, castles, and market towns, scattered pieces of the same terrible puzzle are slowly falling into place. The image they will eventually reveal has not yet become visible, but with each passing sunrise, another piece quietly finds its position. The days grow a little shorter. It is not yet autumn, but the seasons have begun their slow, almost imperceptible turn. Sunrise arrives a few moments later than it did only weeks before, and evening shadows linger just a little longer across the streets. Most people scarcely notice the change. Medieval life follows the sun so closely that the passing of seasons is felt more than measured. In the countryside beyond the city, farmers hurry to complete the remaining harvest before the weather becomes less predictable. Bundles of wheat stand in orderly rows across the fields. Oxen pull wagons laden with grain toward village barns. Women spread herbs upon woven mats to dry beneath the warm afternoon sun. Every household prepares for the colder months ahead. Winter cannot be bargained with. It arrives whether a family is ready or not. You spend the morning helping unload firewood near the homes of several elderly townspeople who can no longer gather enough timber themselves. The work is heavy, but satisfying. Every neatly stacked pile beside a doorway represents warmth that may one day keep a family alive during a bitter night. One old widow thanks you with a loaf of dark rye bread still warm from her oven. It isn't much. It is more than enough, you reply. She smiles. When you reach my age, you learn that kindness is never measured by its size. Simple exchanges like these bind medieval communities together. There are few formal systems to protect those who struggle. Neighbors become the safety net. When someone's roof collapses, others rebuild it. When illness keeps a farmer from the fields, nearby families often harvest his crops before they spoil. When a child loses parents, relatives, or neighbors, usually open their own doors. Survival depends upon cooperation as much as hard work. Around midday, the city council gathers inside the guild hall. Most citizens know little about what is discussed during these meetings. Taxes, road repairs, market regulations, disputes between merchants. Such matters rarely concern ordinary laborers directly. Today, however, word spreads that travelers have delivered additional reports from southern trade routes. No official announcement follows. Still, people notice several council members leaving the hall with unusually serious expressions. Questions begin circulating almost immediately. What have they heard? Is there trouble? Will the autumn fair still take place? No one can answer with confidence. By afternoon, you visit the blacksmith to repair the iron buckle on your belt. The forge radiates intense heat despite the pleasant weather outside. The blacksmith's apprentice pumps the great leather bellows steadily, while sparks leap from glowing metal with every strike of the hammer. The master blacksmith wipes sweat from his brow. I've been making more horseshoes than usual. More travelers. He nods. More people leaving. The observation surprises you. I thought travelers were arriving. They are. He places another piece of iron into the fire. But lately, he pauses thoughtfully. More seem to be passing through instead of staying. Communities react to uncertainty in different ways. Some people seek the safety of familiar homes. Others believe opportunity lies elsewhere. Neither choice guarantees protection. Both simply reflect humanity's enduring hope that another place might somehow prove safer. Leaving the forge, you notice the streets remain lively, though something subtle has shifted. The laughter is still there. The merchants still bargain energetically. Children still play games beneath the watchful eyes of their mothers. Yet strangers are greeted with slightly greater caution. A wagon entering the gate attracts longer glances. Travelers find themselves answering more questions before conversations move on to friendlier topics. No law demands such curiosity. Instinct does. People may not understand disease, but they understand uncertainty remarkably well. Toward evening, Brother Matthew arrives from the monastery carrying baskets filled with dried herbs intended for several elderly residents. The townspeople welcome him warmly. He seems to know everyone by name. One woman asks whether the monastery has heard any new reports. The old monk considers the question carefully. We have received letters, and they ask for prayers. The woman waits. For what? Brother Matthew's expression softens. For many things. He offers no further explanation. Whether he wishes to avoid spreading fear or simply lacks reliable information remains impossible to know. Sometimes wisdom lies not in speaking quickly, but in waiting until the truth becomes clearer. As dusk approaches, the physician who recently returned from his journey invites two younger healers to his home. Candles burn upon the table. Between them lie several handwritten manuscripts copied from respected authorities, whose works have guided physicians for generations. They compare observations late into the evening. One describes persistent fevers. Another mentions swollen glands. A third recalls unusual fatigue, preceding more severe symptoms. Each has witnessed only a handful of patients, too few to draw firm conclusions, too many to ignore completely. One younger physician asks a difficult question. What if this is something we have not seen before? The room falls quiet. The older physician finally answers. Then we must observe carefully. His response reflects the heart of good medicine, not certainty, observation. Nature reveals her secrets slowly. Only patience can uncover them. Outside, darkness settles gently across the town. The inn is unusually full tonight. Harvest season often brings extra travelers seeking temporary work before winter. Among them sits an elderly shepherd whose weathered cloak smells faintly of sheep and open hillsides. He speaks little during supper. Only after most guests have finished eating does someone ask where he has come from. A village beyond the eastern forest. How are things there? The shepherd shrugs. Quiet. Everyone seems relieved. Then he adds one more sentence. Quieter than they used to be. What do you mean? He tears another piece of bread before answering. Several families left. For the harvest, I don't know. Were they afraid? He stares into the fire. I think they were uncertain. Uncertainty. The word appears again. Not panic, not terror, simply uncertainty. History often advances through uncertainty, long before fear takes hold. After supper, the youngest boy from the traveling family finally joins the other children, playing quietly in the courtyard. His cough has almost disappeared. His mother smiles with obvious relief as she watches him laughing once more. Several guests remark that children truly are resilient. The innkeeper agrees. They recover faster than the rest of us. No one argues. Hope, once offered even the smallest encouragement, grows quickly. Later that night, as the courtyard empties and lanterns are extinguished one by one, you step outside for a breath of cool air. The moon hangs low above the city wall. Its pale light reveals countless stars scattered across the heavens. Somewhere beyond those distant horizons, countless other towns are settling into sleep beneath the same sky. In one village, a physician finishes recording another unexplained fever. In another, a monk kneels in silent prayer beside a patient whose condition has worsened unexpectedly. Farther south, a harbor master notices that another merchant vessel has arrived with fewer sailors than it carried when it departed months before. Each event appears isolated. Each belongs to its own community, its own story, its own concern. No one yet sees the invisible thread connecting them all. But those threads are multiplying, like tiny streams flowing through separate valleys. They continue, moving quietly toward the same great river. And when they finally merge, their combined force will become impossible for anyone, king, scholar, physician, or peasant, to overlook. A cool wind arrives during the night, carrying with it the unmistakable scent of approaching autumn. By dawn, leaves from the oldest trees have begun collecting along the edges of the streets, their green slowly surrendering to muted shades of yellow and brown. The change is subtle, but no one who has lived through many seasons fails to notice it. The year is quietly moving forward. So too is history. You wake before the church bells sound the first morning prayer. The inn is unusually quiet. Most of the guests who arrived to seek harvest work have already departed, hopping to reach nearby farms before sunrise. Downstairs, the innkeeper is stirring a large pot suspended above the fire. Barley porridge, simple, warm, filling. He nods as you enter. Cold this morning. A little. He smiles. It'll be colder soon enough. Like nearly every conversation in medieval Europe, it eventually returns to the weather. Not because people lack imagination, because weather governs nearly every part of life. Rain determines harvests. Harvests determine food. Food determines survival. Entire kingdoms rise or struggle according to seasons they cannot control. After breakfast, you accompany a wagon delivering sacks of flour to the city's largest bakery. The streets are already alive despite the early hour. Candles still burn behind several windows where craftsmen have begun work before daylight fully reaches their workshops. The bakery stands near the center of the market square. Its ovens have been burning continuously since well before midnight. Heat pours from the open doorway. Inside, several bakers move with astonishing coordination. One kneads dough, another shapes loaves, a third slides long wooden peels into the glowing oven, while a young apprentice brushes flour from every available surface, though more seems to appear almost instantly. The master baker wipes his brow. This year's wheat has been good, better than last year. He nods. Much better. His smile carries genuine relief. A generous harvest offers more than comfort. It creates confidence. People who expect full granaries worry less about the coming winter. Yet confidence can be remarkably fragile. One unexpected hardship has the power to undo months of careful preparation. While unloading flour, you notice several pigeons fluttering beneath the roof beams. They peck eagerly at scattered grains before darting away. Whenever someone walks too close, animals have become such familiar companions in medieval towns that few people think much about sharing space with them. Dogs guard workshops, cats patrol granaries, chickens wander freely through alleyways. Horses, oxen, goats, pigs, geese, and pigeons all live remarkably close to human beings. The boundaries separating people and animals are far less distinct than they will become centuries later. To medieval eyes, this simply represents ordinary life. By mid-morning, the city gates admit another procession of merchants. Unlike previous caravans, these traders carry luxury goods rather than food. Bundles of fine cloth wrapped carefully against dust. Small chests secured with heavy locks. Barrels containing expensive dyes valued by wealthy customers. The arrival draws immediate attention. Prosperity remains an exciting spectacle. Children follow the wagons through the streets until distracted by another amusement. Several merchants from the town greet the newcomers enthusiastically. Business begins almost immediately. Prices are discussed, samples examined, future deliveries negotiated. Trade never truly rests. As conversations continue, one merchant casually asks where the caravan has traveled. The leader lists several cities. Some names are familiar. Others belong to distant regions few listeners will ever visit. Then someone asks another question. Were the roads busy? The caravan leader pauses. Busy enough. And the towns? He considers his answer. Different. What do you mean? He shrugs. Some markets were quieter. Why? I cannot say. Perhaps he genuinely does not know. Or perhaps he has heard too many conflicting stories to trust any of them. Rumors often lose clarity after traveling hundreds of miles. One town speaks of fever, another of strange swellings, a third of unexplained deaths among travelers. By the time such stories reach distant listeners, they overlap until separating fact from imagination becomes nearly impossible. During the afternoon, the physician visits the convent where several elderly residents receive care. most suffer from familiar ailments, arthritic joints, failing eyesight, lingering coughs brought on by advancing age. He moves patiently from bed to bed, offering herbs, advice, and quiet conversation. Healing does not always require dramatic cures. Sometimes it requires simply sitting beside someone who fears being forgotten. One elderly woman reaches for his hand. "Doctor, yes, is it true?" He knows immediately what she means. He could dismiss the rumors. He could offer false certainty. Instead, he answers with remarkable honesty. There is illness in several places. She studies his face. "Will it come here?" The physician looks toward the window, where afternoon sunlight falls gently across the floor. "I do not know." His uncertainty frightens her less than an empty promise might have. Truth often carries its own quiet comfort. Outside the convent, two novice sisters hang freshly washed blankets beneath the warm breeze. They speak cheerfully about the approaching harvest festival. Life continues making plans for the future, because imagining tomorrow remains one of humanity's greatest strengths. Communities do not simply stop living because uncertainty exists. They marry, plant crops, build homes, celebrate feast days, raise children. Hope demands action. As evening approaches, you decide to walk beyond the city walls for a short while. The countryside glows beneath the lowering sun. Farmers gather the final bundles of grain before darkness arrives. Smoke rises from distant cottages where evening meals are already cooking. A flock of geese crosses overhead in perfect formation, heading toward warmer lands. The sight reminds you that nature follows ancient rhythms, entirely indifferent to human concerns. Birds migrate, trees shed leaves, rivers continue flowing. The world remains astonishingly beautiful, even while unseen dangers move quietly within it. On your way back, you encounter an elderly traveler resting beside the roadside. His walking staff lies across his knees. His boots show years of careful repairs. He greets you warmly. You headed into town. You nod. So am I. The two of you continue together. He explains that he has spent much of his life making pilgrimages to shrines scattered across Europe. You've seen many places, a great many. Have people changed? He smiles thoughtfully. No. Then, after several moments, he adds, but their worries do. You ask what worries people now. He glances toward the distant city gate. These days, everyone asks about sickness before they ask about the harvest. His observation is impossible to dismiss. Only weeks ago, conversations almost always began with crops, weather, or prices. Now illness enters nearly every discussion, even among those who have witnessed none themselves. Fear has not yet taken hold. Awareness has. There is an important difference. Night falls gently across the town. Inside the inn, candles flicker against timber walls, darkened by generations of smoke. Guests eat quietly. The youngest boy from the southern family laughs as he teaches another child a simple game involving carved wooden pieces and a rough board scratched with lines. His parents exchange relieved smiles. Whatever troubled him appears to have passed. The atmosphere feels lighter than it has for several evenings. Even the old merchant unfolds his treasured map with less concern than before. He points toward a distant trade route while telling stories of bustling ports filled with languages from every corner of the known world. For a little while, curiosity replaces anxiety. It is a welcome change. Yet, hundreds of miles away, in another harbor touched by those very same trade routes, a monastery bell begins ringing before dawn. Then another. Not long afterward, a third. The brothers preparing for morning prayer pause briefly. One quietly remarks that the cemetery has received more visitors this week than usual. Another nods without speaking. No conclusions are drawn. Not yet, but careful observers, physicians, monks, merchants, and travelers alike are beginning to notice that the small, scattered pieces no longer seem entirely unrelated. Something is moving, slowly enough to escape immediate recognition, steadily enough that each passing week leaves behind another question that no one has yet learned how to answer. Several days pass without any dramatic event. At first, this feels like good news. The rumors continue arriving, but the city itself remains much as it has always been. Markets open at dawn. Church bells mark the passing hours. The blacksmith's hammer rings through the streets from sunrise until evening. Children race through muddy alleys, inventing games from little more than sticks, stones, and limitless imagination. Life has a remarkable talent for convincing people that tomorrow will resemble yesterday. That belief allows civilizations to function. Without it, no one would plant orchards that take years to bear fruit or build cathedrals requiring generations to complete. Hope is woven into every long-term endeavor. You find yourself assigned to help repair a section of the wooden palisade surrounding one of the city's outer storehouses. Several support beams have begun to rot after years of exposure to rain and snow. The work is slow. Old timbers must be removed carefully before new ones can take their place. Nearby, a carpenter explains that good oak should outlast several generations if properly maintained. His apprentice listens attentively while smoothing rough edges with a draw knife. You always measure twice, the carpenter says, and cut once. The lesson has little to do with wood alone. Careful preparation often prevents mistakes that cannot easily be corrected later. Medieval craftsmen understand this deeply. Whether constructing bridges, forging swords, copying manuscripts, or brewing ale, patience remains one of the most valuable skills a person can possess. Around midday, a mounted messenger arrives through the western gate, at unusual speed. His horse breathes heavily. Foam gathers around the bit. The rider wastes no time dismounting before hurrying toward the Guildhall, carrying a leather tube sealed with wax. People notice. People always notice urgency. Within minutes, speculation begins flowing through the marketplace. Perhaps the king has issued new taxes. Perhaps another border dispute has erupted. Perhaps no one suggests disease immediately. Even after weeks of rumors, the human mind still searches first for explanations it already understands. The messenger remains inside the Guildhall for less than half an hour before riding away again. No public announcement follows, yet several council members spend the remainder of the afternoon speaking quietly with the town physician. Their conversations remain private. Their expressions do not. You happen to pass nearby while carrying tools back toward the warehouse. The physician's face reveals neither panic nor calm. Instead, it carries something more difficult to define: concentration, the look of someone attempting to assemble scattered pieces into a meaningful picture. Later that day, Brother Matthew visits the physician. The two men stroll slowly through the monastery garden, speaking so softly that only occasional words drift upon the breeze. Letters, similar symptoms, 3 towns, uncertain. They stop beside a patch of lavender, buzzing gently with bees. The physician bends to inhale its familiar fragrance. Brother Matthew folds his hands inside his sleeves. Neither man appears frightened. Both appear thoughtful. Thoughtfulness often precedes important decisions. As the afternoon shadows lengthen, another wagon reaches the city gate. Its driver is a miller transporting flour from a village scarcely a day's journey away. The guards perform their now familiar routine. Where have you traveled? Has your village remained well? The miller nods. So far, the phrase catches everyone's attention. So far, not yes, not certainly, simply, so far. He continues before anyone can ask another question. There was a fever in the next village, but they say it has passed. The guards exchange brief glances before allowing him inside. The words spread almost instantly through nearby streets. There was a fever. It has passed. Both parts of the story travel together. Some listeners focus upon the fever, others upon the recovery. People naturally hear whichever part best matches their own expectations. Toward evening, the marketplace grows unusually crowded. A traveling scholar has arrived carrying a small collection of handwritten books. Unlike merchants selling cloth or spices, he trades knowledge. For a modest fee, he copies letters, translates documents, and occasionally reads aloud for those unable to read themselves. A small audience gathers. As he opens one weathered manuscript describing the great cities of the Eastern Mediterranean, he speaks of magnificent libraries, bustling ports, ancient universities, markets overflowing with goods from lands even farther east, the listeners become captivated. For a little while, distant places seem filled only with wonder rather than danger. When the reading ends, someone asks whether he encountered illness during his travels. The scholar smiles faintly. I encountered illness everywhere. Several people look puzzled. He explains, every town has sickness. Every village buries its dead. The question is never whether illness exists. He closes the manuscript gently. The question is whether it behaves as expected. His observation lingers in the minds of those listening. Disease itself is not unusual. It has always accompanied humanity. What unsettles physicians and travelers alike are illnesses that suddenly refuse to follow familiar patterns. That evening, rain begins once more. A light autumn rain, not enough to flood the streets, only enough to fill the air with the comforting scent of wet earth and damp timber. Inside the inn, guests gather close to the hearth. The old merchant produces his treasured map again. Though tonight, he spends less time tracing roads than listening to others. A sailor describes unusually strict inspections at one southern harbor. A merchant claims another town delayed its annual livestock market. A pilgrim says one monastery has begun asking visitors more questions than before. Each story is small. Each could easily have an ordinary explanation. Together, however, they begin forming a pattern impossible to ignore. No one around the fire says so directly. The realization grows silently, much like dawn gradually replacing darkness, without anyone noticing the precise moment night disappears. Before retiring upstairs, you step outside beneath the covered entrance of the inn. Rain falls steadily into puddles, reflecting the wavering glow of lanterns. The streets are nearly empty. Only the watchman continues his slow rounds, his cloak darkened by moisture. He pauses near the gate, where another guard stands looking toward the road, disappearing into darkness. Expecting someone, the watchman asks. The guard shakes his head. No. Then why keep watching? The guard thinks for a moment before answering. I suppose. He glances once more toward the unseen horizon. I'm wondering what tomorrow might bring. It is a simple sentence, yet perhaps no other question has occupied humanity more often throughout history. What will tomorrow bring? Harvest or famine? Peace or war? Birth or loss? Health or sickness? The answer remains hidden beyond the darkness, and somewhere far along those rain-soaked roads, another traveler continues steadily toward the city, unaware that his journey carries with it another small piece of a story that Europe has only just begun to read. The traveler reaches the city just after sunrise. A pale mist still hangs over the fields beyond the walls, softening the outlines of distant trees until they appear almost painted upon the horizon. Dew glistens on the grass outside the gate, and the first rays of morning sunlight catch countless tiny droplets, making the countryside sparkle with deceptive serenity. The gatekeeper recognizes neither the man nor the mule pulling his small cart. That is hardly unusual. Hundreds of strangers pass through every month. Still, the questions now come almost automatically. Where have you traveled from? The man removes his worn cap. A market town 3 days south. How were the roads? Muddy. And the villages? The traveler hesitates. Mostly quiet. The gatekeeper notices the pause. Mostly. The man shifts the weight of his satchel. One village buried several people. What happened? They said it was fever. The gatekeeper waits. The traveler merely shrugs. I stayed only long enough to water the mule. The exchange lasts less than a minute. The cart rolls into the city. Life continues. Yet the gatekeeper finds himself watching the departing traveler for several moments longer than he normally would. Questions have become habits. Habits are quietly changing the city. Inside the walls, the market awakens beneath a sky gradually clearing of morning clouds. A fish seller arranges freshly caught trout upon crushed reeds. Nearby, a cheesemaker carefully unwraps rounds of hard cheese, aged throughout the summer. The smell of wood smoke mingles with fresh bread, onions, leather, damp wool, and the faint sweetness drifting from baskets filled with late-season apples. It is the scent of ordinary life. You spend the early hours helping unload barrels of salted herring delivered from the coast. The barrels are remarkably heavy. Salt preserves the fish well enough to survive journeys lasting weeks, making it one of the few dependable sources of protein during the colder months. As each barrel is rolled into storage, the warehouse keeper marks careful notes upon a wax tablet. Nothing is left to memory alone. A missing barrel means hungry mouths later in the year. While working, one of the older laborers begins telling stories about winters from his childhood. There was one year, he says, resting both hands upon a barrel, when the river froze so solid that wagons crossed it. Several younger workers stare in disbelief. Wagons, he nods, entire caravans. Another laughs. I'll believe that when I see it. The old laborer smiles. You will, if you live long enough. His words remind everyone that experience often sounds unbelievable to those who have not yet accumulated it. History itself works much the same way. One generation witnesses events the next can scarcely imagine. By midday, the physician receives another letter. Unlike the previous messages carried by exhausted writers, this one arrives through a merchant returning from the West. The parchment bears the seal of a fellow physician known to him from years earlier, when both studied the writings of ancient medical authorities. He breaks the wax carefully. His eyes move slowly across the page. Several times, he returns to earlier lines, reading them again. When he finally folds the letter, he remains seated in silence. His apprentice notices. Bad news. The physician answers thoughtfully. Not bad. The apprentice looks puzzled. Then good. The older man shakes his head. Clear. He hands the letter across the table. The apprentice struggles with the formal Latin, but gradually understands its meaning. Another physician, another town, another collection of patients suffering nearly identical symptoms. Fever, painful swellings, rapid decline. The apprentice lowers the parchment. So it wasn't only here. No, the physician gazes toward the window. It was never only here. For the first time, scattered observations begin connecting through written correspondence. Medicine advances not only through knowledge, but through communication. Separated physicians now realize they are witnessing pieces of the same larger mystery. Still, they possess no explanation, only evidence. Across the marketplace, preparations continue for the approaching feast day. Colorful ribbons decorate several stalls. A baker experiments with sweeter loaves reserved for special occasions. Children gather fallen leaves to weave into simple crowns, while pretending to be kings and queens from old stories. Human beings celebrate whenever they can. Festivals offer relief from endless labor, a reminder that life contains more than work and worry. No one wishes to cancel such traditions based solely upon uncertain rumors. The afternoon brings unexpected warmth. Sunlight floods the square, encouraging musicians to perform beneath the open sky. A fiddler plays lively dances, while two brothers accompany him using a small drum and wooden pipe. Within minutes, children begin dancing. Soon, several adults join them. Laughter echoes between stone buildings. For a little while, the city feels wonderfully unchanged. Watching them, it becomes impossible not to notice something remarkable about history. Even as great events approach, ordinary happiness continues existing alongside them. The two do not replace one another. They coexist. A child chasing a hoop through the street has no idea that historians centuries later will describe these same months as the beginning of one of Europe's darkest eras. To the child, today is simply another beautiful afternoon. That innocence possesses its own quiet beauty. Toward evening, Brother Matthew returns from visiting several villages outside the city. His sandals carry fresh mud. His cloak bears the scent of damp forests crossed during the journey. After evening prayers, he joins the physician for a modest meal. They speak openly now. The letters continue. They do. Do the descriptions match? The physician nods slowly. More closely each week, Brother Matthew studies the candle flame flickering between them. What do you think it is? The physician sighs. I think. He stops, then begins again. I think we are still asking the wrong question. The monk raises an eyebrow. What should we ask? The physician reaches for one of the letters. Not what it is. He gently taps the parchment, but where it is going. The room grows quiet, until now, physicians have focused primarily upon identifying the illness itself. Perhaps another question deserves equal attention: its movement, its direction, its pattern. Outside, a flock of crows settles noisily upon the branches of an old elm overlooking the cemetery. The sexton works quietly among the graves, trimming overgrown grass and straightening wooden markers, weathered by years of wind and rain. Death has always required care, even during peaceful times. He hums softly while working. Tomorrow another funeral may come, or perhaps none at all. Such uncertainty has always belonged to his profession. As darkness settles across the city, the feast day decorations remain hanging above the marketplace, gently stirring in the evening breeze. Lanterns glow warmly behind shuttered windows. Families gather around simple meals. Parents tuck sleepy children beneath wool blankets. The youngest boy from the southern family falls asleep before finishing his evening prayer, his earlier illness now seemingly forgotten. His mother smiles as she carefully pulls the blanket over his shoulders. Small recoveries encourage enormous hope. Elsewhere across Europe, however, not every household receives such comfort. In another town connected by the same roads, another family sits awake beside a loved one whose fever has refused to fade. A physician has already exhausted every remedy he knows. Herbs, compresses, prayer, rest, nothing has changed the course of the illness. He leaves the house long after midnight carrying a satchel that feels heavier than when he arrived, not because it contains more medicine, but because it now carries one more unanswered question. The first frost arrives quietly. It clings to rooftops before dawn, dusts the fields with silver, and settles upon every fence post, wagon wheel, and blade of grass surrounding the town. When the sun finally rises, the frozen landscape sparkles as though covered with countless tiny crystals. Children rush outside to leave footprints in the white coating before it disappears. Old farmers study the sky. The season has turned, one remarks. No one disagrees. Winter is coming. For generations, winter has always been one of medieval Europe's greatest tests. Families count sacks of grain, inspect stores of salted meat, stack another row of firewood against the wall, and quietly calculate whether their supplies will last until spring. This year, however, another calculation occupies people's minds. Not everyone says it aloud, but nearly everyone thinks it. Will the strange sickness remain far away, or is it still moving? The marketplace opens despite the cold. Merchants stamp their feet to restore feeling to numb toes. Breath hangs in the air like pale smoke. The smell of roasting chestnuts drifts between stalls, offering welcome warmth to anyone with a spare coin. Business continues. It must. A town that stops trading is already beginning to fail. You spend the morning repairing storage shelves inside the grain warehouse. The wood has has shrunk slightly in the colder air, loosening several joints that must be secured before heavy sacks are stacked for winter. As you work, the warehouse keeper speaks almost absent-mindedly. My father always feared empty barns. He tightens a wooden peg with his mallet. I've begun fearing empty streets. The words surprise even him. He pauses, realizing he has spoken his thoughts aloud. Neither of you says anything more. Sometimes silence acknowledges truth better than conversation. Later that afternoon, the physician receives visitors from 2 neighboring towns. Not patients, physicians. The 3 men gather around a long table covered with handwritten notes. Each has brought observations, dates, symptoms, treatments attempted, outcomes. For hours, they compare records line by line. At first, the differences seem important. One town reports illness among sailors, another among merchants, the third among laborers. Yet beneath those differences, the similarities remain impossible to dismiss. The fevers burn with frightening intensity. The swellings appear suddenly. The weakness follows swiftly. No treatment has shown consistent success. One physician quietly closes his notebook. I no longer believe these are separate outbreaks. No one argues. Another speaks. If they are connected, he never finishes the sentence. He does not need to. Everyone at the table understands what remains unspoken. Brother Matthew arrives before evening prayer. The physicians share their observations with him. He listens patiently, asking only a handful of careful questions. When they finish, he looks toward the monastery garden outside the window. Most of the herbs have already been harvested. Only a few hardy plants remain standing against the approaching winter. There is a lesson in gardens, he says softly. The others wait. A single withered leaf means very little. But when every gardener in every village begins describing the same withered leaves, he turns back toward them. It is no longer only one garden. The room falls silent. For the first time, the larger picture has begun to emerge. Not completely, not clearly, but enough that thoughtful men can no longer dismiss coincidence. As darkness approaches, church bells echo across the town. Families gather around evening meals. Children recite simple prayers before climbing into bed. The baker prepares dough for tomorrow's bread. The blacksmith lets the forge cool after another long day's work. The watchman lights the lantern above the northern gate, exactly as he has done every evening for years. Routine continues. Routine always continues until the day it cannot. You climb the city wall one final time before winter truly settles over the land. From there, the roads stretch toward every horizon. Some disappear into forests. Others cross rivers. Still others vanish over distant hills. By day they carry merchants, pilgrims, messengers, students, farmers. By night, they become little more than dark ribbons winding through the sleeping countryside. Looking upon them now, you realize something that would never have occurred to you only a few months earlier. Every road is a promise. It promises opportunity, friendship, knowledge, trade, adventure, but every road is also a responsibility. Whatever travels outward may one day return. The wind grows colder. Below, the town glows softly beneath hundreds of candles shining through narrow windows. It looks peaceful, safe, timeless, yet history rarely announces itself with trumpets. It arrives quietly. One letter, one rumor, one physician comparing notes with another, one traveler mentioning an unfamiliar fever, one family deciding to leave home, one harbor receiving a ship that seems no different from every vessel before it. Only afterward do people realize they have already crossed the threshold into another age. The continent still sleeps. Kings continue governing. Monks continue praying. Merchants continue bargaining. Children continue laughing. None of them yet understand that they stand upon the edge of a chapter that future generations will remember for centuries. The invisible tide has already begun to rise. Its first ripples have touched the shores of Europe. The great wave has not yet arrived, but it is coming, slowly, relentlessly, silently, and in the next chapter of this journey, you will witness the moment when whispers become certainty, when isolated tragedies become a continental catastrophe, and when medieval Europe first comes face to face with one of the most horrifying diseases in human history. Before we continue into that unforgettable chapter, remember to like the video if you've been enjoying this journey through history, and subscribe for more slow, immersive historical stories designed to help you relax, learn, and drift peacefully to sleep. Until next time, rest well, and let history keep watch through the night.